What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video on the Soul Hoops channel. It is me, Jeffrey, and I'm joined with Matthias today. We're doing a shorter content type of video today. We're going to be back with a full podcast recording tomorrow that'll come out either Sunday or Monday. But we decided to make a video today because me and Matthias have been itching to make some content while we're home. We're getting in that cabin fever type thing. But today we're going to be talking about an interesting question that we saw posed and talked about originally from JJ Redick's podcast, The Old Man and the Three, is defense going to win you a championship? Is defense winning championships in the modern NBA in 2023? So first, I want to go through the offensive rating and defensive rating of the last. I'm gonna do the 5 champions. So I think 2018 was probably like the more renaissance year, I would say. I like that KD Warriors year, or do you want to go back a little further?
We can do 5. Let's start with 5 years, and then we can expand it to see how the trends change.
Yeah. So 2018, the Warriors were the number 3 offense and the number 11 defense. 2019, the Raptors were 5 in both offense and defensive rating, and the Lakers were 11th in offense and 3 in defense. The Bucks were 6 in offense and 10 in defense in 2021. And then the Warriors were number 17 in offense, if you can believe that, number 1 in defense in 2022. And then 2023 is not on here listed because they don't have like all the numbers, recalibrated in this article. But the Nuggets were the 15th ranked defense and like the 4th or 5th ranked offense at the end of the year. And this is regular season rating. And how defensive and offensive rating is compiled is how many points you score in offense. Offensive rating is how many points you score per 100 possessions, and defensive rating is how many points you give up per 100 possessions. It's a pace-adjusted scoring and defensive stat. So what do you think about this whole sort of thought process?
Well, I think the thought process that you don't need defense to win is just you got to throw it out the window. I think you have to show capability in the regular season to be a good defense.
Yeah.
And if you look, all of them are top 15 defenses, right?
Yeah.
They barely hit the mark, but you have to be better than average, at least in the regular season. And honestly, I feel like the Nuggets are kind of the outlier there. They were at 15. The other 2 lowest ranking were 11, right? 11 or 10.
Yeah, the Bucks were 10 and the Warriors in 2018 were 11.
Yeah. And it's just like, even if they are ranked 11th, like they're still capable, a still capable defensive team. And that's what matters. Like, for instance, Pacers, they're not a capable defense. We can probably write them off.
Yeah.
As title contenders, no matter if they were a 3 seed. Every single time the Blazers were in the playoffs, you could write them off because they weren't a capable defense. It's just like, I think there is a certain threshold where you can start writing teams off 100%.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think you really have to look at comparatively how they're performing in comparison to the teams around them. I think when you're evaluating offensive and defensive rating, a lot of that, it is an adjusted pace stat, but it also kind of isn't, because a team that plays at a higher pace is going to automatically give up more points than a team that slows down the pace more. And teams that play at a slower pace are always going to give up less points because there's going to be less transition opportunities on both sides. There's usually less turnovers in low pace, teams. And the Warriors always push the pace a lot when they were really good. That was like kind of their thing. Push the pace, and if we're not playing, we're going to run the motion offense. Yeah. And those turnovers often led to transition opportunities for worse teams, allowing them to get a lot of open looks, transition dunks, layups. And that's also why you see a lot of good teams, not good teams, but very good offensive teams tend to give up a lot of opportunities in transition. I would say with when you're evaluating that part of it, it's how do you take care of the ball and how do you play defense in the half court opportunities. There's
Yeah.
very, very minuscule opportunities for transition in the playoffs. Playoff
Yeah, it slows
transition
down for sure.
transition looks are always cut down because there's less fouls called, so they allow you to be more aggressive in half court defense, and it creates a little bit less of that sloppy, offense that you see, bringing the ball up, throwing it on in bad passes and stuff like that. So I think I would agree with the sentiment that you just need to be a capable defense. Do you think that you need to be? Do you think you need to be elite at any one thing in order to be that to do that? Because I think that you need to be really good at least one thing. I think you need
Yeah,
to be
I
either.
hesitated at first because I was trying to think of what the Nuggets were elite at, but they caused a lot of passing lane steals.
Mhm.
And even though they weren't like they were still like a rim deterrent team, and that's what many people seem to not pay attention to with defense. And it's actually big in the half court is rim deterrent, just keeping players away from the rim.
Yeah.
Because if they're not shooting at the rim, it's immediately a harder look. That means you're forcing them into middies, forcing them to jump shots, forcing them to floaters, threes, whatever. And a defense will take that over a layup any day. So yeah, I think just looking back at it, Bucks, even though they gave up a lot of threes, elite in drop coverage.
Yeah.
The Warriors were a pretty switch heavy team if I remember correctly, right?
In
Pretty elite
22, in 22 they played a lot of switch. This is the year that this is obviously the Wiggins year. So this is when they ran their death lineup with Wiggins at the 4.
Mm-hmm. And they were, if I
right.
remember correctly, they were also a really good rebounding team too. For some reason,
Yeah,
like in
this
the
was
playoffs.
this was Looney's best year. I would say rebounding wise, and that's one thing that people overlook on defense is having someone who can close possessions for you.
Mhm.
You can play a great defense the whole entire time, but if you give up an offensive rebound, it's all for nothing because you get another 14 seconds on the shot clock, and that puts even more pressure. You have to rearrange. Usually, perimeter players are going to start leaking out in transition, especially in the modern NBA where corner threes are so important. Your shooters are going to start leaking out in transition. You're not going to have coverage for every player. You're scrambling to recover. So being able to close possessions I think is a really important aspect. That's why the Knicks literally are winning games because they put so much pressure on the offensive glass, just creating second opportunities for themselves. They're not an elite scoring team, but they create extra opportunities, which helps them stay in games longer.
Yeah.
Do you think you just need to be like the capable defense? Like, do you think just with how explosive the offense is nowadays, you just need to be able to limit. This is like kind of where that thing, like you need to be really good at one thing at least. And I think it's
Yeah.
like you need to be able to limit opportunities, and then you also need to like be able to really lock in and create offensive opportunity off your defensive opportunity using defense to offense and offense to defense, because I think a lot of teams that are very good defensively and it might be good offensively as well, offensively and defensively. I think a lot of times you see those two sides of the floor do not cohesively play together. And I think the Cavs are a good example of that. I don't think their defensive style plays well into how they like to play offense or how they should be playing offense. I think,
Not at all.
and I think that's why you see the disconnect in games, because on defense, they want to be a slow paced, rim deterrent, funnel defense. And then on offense, they want to be like fast paced. Let's get shots up. Let's get to the rim really quickly, create a lot of opportunities. And I think when you don't work both sides of the court together, it doesn't help what you're trying to do. Or if your style of defense doesn't work. I mean, even if you're not good at it, being able to actually use the opportunities that you're trying to create, it helps.
No, I get it. Yeah, I think you're right. They have to find the identity. And for that, like when a team knows who they are defensively, it helps them prepare for their weaknesses. And like a really good example, Bucks with Budenholzer knew their identity. Drop only drop. You live with the threes. So when you get into playoff time, you know what you have to scheme for. You know what you're doing, and everybody's on the same page. So when you're a capable defense and you just lock in to what you're good at, and you kind of and everyone's bought into this identity, you're able to cover the holes of maybe like what you won't be good at. And I also want to talk about like the improvement of offenses because I do think that has something to skew with regular season offensive ratings because you see it a lot in the regular season. A random really good team will just like have 145 points dropped on them by like a bottom feeder. Like it's the NBA, everybody can score. Like you got like terrible teams with 27 points per game scores, right? Anybody can
Cam
light up.
Thomas is giving you buckets.
Yeah,
Every
anybody
time.
can light anybody up in the NBA at this point. And
Yeah.
it's like, so I think looking at defensive ratings and making sure they're in a reasonable realm of other top defenses, like a lot of times they're only separated by a few points. So it's like, oh, they're giving up one more three a game, one more three per 100 per possessions. Like, are they really that much worse than a top five defense if they give up 2.8 point more points? It's like, no. So it's like, you just got to make sure they're within the realm. And
Yeah.
like you said, I was actually a really good point. I do want to highlight that as well. Focusing on their half court defense is really important because,
Yeah.
and I think also the steals and like turnovers forced in the half court is super important because even though fast breaks are slowed down in the playoffs, it's usually due to like you slow down the playoffs. You slow down in half court, you don't turn it over as much because you're not moving as fast, or like you secure the rebound and you want to get in your sets. But if you create a half court turnover, like that's not something a team can prepare to run back for. That's something that's an easy bucket that when the game slows down and you're not speeding people up, you can get an easy bucket.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight just because defensive rating is often what we evaluate this off of. So the league leader in defensive rating this season is the Timberwolves at 108.1. Last year, I believe give me 1 second actually because I can pull it up.
Last year, I think I have last year's.
Yeah, last year, so the highest defensive rating was 109.9. So the defensive rating is shifting up to lower numbers over the last few years. But even then, like if you go back to 21-22, the league leader, was Boston at 106. I mean, Timberwolves would be barely a top 10 defense. They would be what did I say their first one was? 109?
106, 106.9.
108, 108.1.
Playoff.
Like Philly is considered a really good defense. They wouldn't be top 10 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you go to 2021, it's the same thing. Like they would be barely top 10.
But then again, you're looking at the Celtics who gave up 106, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Timberwolves this year they gave up 108, and it's like they gave up one more bucket per 100 possessions. It's not. There's actually a lot less range in the just catch-all defensive rating than people realize. You know what I mean? And I think the Nuggets honestly prove that because, like, I can pull it up here. Last year, they had a defensive rating of 114. That was 4 or 5 points worse than the best in the league. That's 2 buckets, 2 possessions. You slow the game down, the game might shrink by more than 2 possessions, and you don't even have to worry about it type stuff. So it's like,
I would say the same thing. And also when you look at like, for example, defense rating this year, like the Bucks right now are kind of the poster boy for saying that their defense is going to be good enough to win a championship. Whatever. Like their defensive rating right now is 115.3 and 115.5. They're like literally if they held a team to 112 points, they'd probably jump up to like 15. Like the next day. I mean, when you're evaluating this, I think, like we said, you have to look at the range that they're in. I mean, the difference between 20, which the Bucks are sitting at right now, and 13 is literally 1.7 points. Like
Yeah,
that's nothing. That's
it's a trip to the free throw line.
yeah, and that can literally be or garbage time when you put your bums in and they just start chucking. It's like, okay, well, Robin Lopez is guarding the paint now for the Bucks, like, and it's like, okay, well, they're just getting to the rim at ease. So
Yeah,
I do think you have to evaluate it within the range. I think you can look at it as it can be problematic, but I think if you're good enough at one aspect individually of defense, and I think you can understand that you might have the personnel to really lock in on defense at some point, that could be where you're really looking forward to. But I want to talk about the offensive side of the ball in this same conversation because I think it's unfair to say like what you're saying, like you need a good defense. You need to be a competent to good defense a lot of the game to be able to win, especially in the playoffs,
yeah,
especially when you're seeing a team for 7 straight games. But the offensive side of this, I think when you're really looking at it, I mean, the explosiveness of any, like you were saying, the explosiveness of every team is able to just absolutely explode for a huge scoring nights at any moment's notice. I think the ability to create explosive offense consistently is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than having a good defense. Because you've seen it so many times in the last few years where there's a really good defensive team who struggles to create consistent explosive offense, and they get to the playoffs, and everyone says, well, maybe it'll be fine because the game slows down in the playoffs, so maybe the explosive offense isn't necessary. But then they struggle to play at a slow pace as well, and that consistent offense does not carry them where it needs to.
yeah. Well, yeah, you can't win with just defense. Um, Offensively, I would say at this point it's probably like a 65-35 in terms of like how important offense is, I would say, in just terms
Yeah.
of player evaluation and team evaluation. The name of the game is putting the ball in the damn basket. Like
Mhm.
you can't win if you can't do that. You see that with really good defensive teams throughout time. Like Green Grand Grizzlies, good example, right?
Yeah.
Slow offense, wasn't really super explosive. But yeah, they had talent, but elite defense, but couldn't get anywhere. Well, Eric Bledsoe's Bucks,
Yeah. Um,
historic playoff defense, if I remember correctly.
yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Like a 99 defensive rating.
Yeah, you have to have, like you said, they have to have a balance where they feed off of each other.
Mhm.
And I think
I think the
I don't know about
Timberwolves are a good
yeah,
example of what that right now.
yeah,
Honestly, they're such
Avs,
a good defensive team, um, and but you can see it every game they lose. Their offense, they just is a game where their offense doesn't play well, um, and not playing well for a subpar offense is significantly more damning than a subpar offensive night for a elite offense. Um, if a team that's scoring 115 points a game only scores 108, that's usually all right. But a team that's only scoring 108 points a game and they score 97, that's probably not going to bode well for them. Like you just
no, yeah, you have to score in the hundreds to win the NBA usually at this point.
yeah, even the 110s, 120s most nights.
Yeah, and I think a good example, honestly, from two top tier teams. We talked a little bit about it earlier in the show, but Celtics versus Nuggets. Let's look at their 3-point variance, right? The Celtics take a their explode. They can be explosive with threes, but they lack the consistency with them, right? So even
Yeah.
though they may be getting good looks or whatever, they are producing at the same consistency and rate as a team like the Nuggets. Like, look last year at that roster, they had maybe like 5 total bad shooting nights. Like, that might be an exaggeration, but they shot well from behind 3 at all times, basically. And like, that's because they were consistent and that reliant on the offense. Like, even if you're getting good looks, you have to make sure they go in.
Yeah.
And that's also a problem that you have when you have superstars or like really good rosters that maybe don't fit. And that's why offensives can get crunched down in the playoffs. Because stars can give you open looks, they have gravity, but you have to make sure that you have, just like I said on defense, you have role players that fit the identity. You have to know your identity on offense too. And as a roster manager, as a GM, and as a coach, you have to make sure that you're putting guys out that are going to finish plays and fit that offense. And if you don't have that consistency next to your top guy, you're not going to win.
Yeah. And I think I think a good point to a lot of that with her, it's like with the personnel type of stuff. You see it right now. If you cannot play offense, you can't be on the court. You just can't be on the court. You see it right now. Jared Vanderbilt, I think, is like the poster boy for this year. Like, he probably is as close to a one-way player in the NBA as there is right now. He's averaging like 1 point a game on like 25% shooting, like true shooting. He can't shoot free throws. His corner shot is completely gone. He can't create for himself. The only value he really brings is cutting. But it's like, why would I have you out there if I could have Torian Prince out there to play the floor, where he can stretch the floor? Why would I have you out there instead of Cam Reddish, who Cam Reddish can stretch the floor and play defense as well, just as well? And I think if you don't have the personnel to be able to play two-way ability, even at an average level, you can't be on the court. And you see it a lot because there's more offensive players that are average to below average at defense getting high rotational minutes on good teams than there is good defensive players that can't play offense.
Yeah. And a good example of like the reverse of Vanderbilt, Duncan Robinson, even though he's improved defensively, he will always have a job in the NBA.
Yes.
Even last year, he was terrible. People wanted him traded. He was benched. Come playoff time, he had value because he was an elite play ender. That's all you need. Like, sometimes you just need a play ender. And I guess like someone like PJ Tucker, again, who's not very offensively talented, but he makes offensive players put in work. Like, he is a great defensive motor. At some point, it's like, is that valuable? Because these offensive players are working, but they're still getting a shot. It just takes them 2 more combos. And at that point, it's like, his PJ Tucker is giving up 8 points on offense. Still giving up 30.
His defense is interesting because I think prime PJ Tucker, that Rockets PJ Tucker, was an elite two-way player. But over the years, the shot has like completely disappeared, which is weird because usually it's the other way around. Usually the jump shot stays, but the defense falls off. He's a weird player. But I think the impact of that defense, not as strong as it used to be. He's not as switchable. And you can put him in the corner on offense, but nobody's guarding him. I mean, there might be a night where you luck into him hitting a couple threes. But it's probably not going to happen. And then, you see it right now on the Clippers. The Clippers he's not playing on the Clippers after the trade. And it's just like, he can't play offense. His defense is okay, but it's really not elite enough where it's like we can sacrifice that. So that's what I was thinking. I wanted to ask you this question. What do you think is the best style of defense to play as a playoff team? Because I think every team kind of plays some version of drop coverage as their base scheme. Regardless. It's the most basic. It works the easiest.
In my opinion.
It's the easiest to run. It's the easiest to coach a big man on how to play. Obviously, coaching a big man to be an elite drop coverage player is a whole different thing. But
Um,
But I was wondering what you think would be is the most. Do you think it's like the high ball pressure gambling type of
no,
defense, the switch
no.
heavy?
I guess I'd have to go switch heavy just because, but I struggle saying that because that's so hard to build around. Like,
You need like five guys. Like if you're going to run a switch defense in a playoff setting for your base, you have to have a Bam. You have to have
a Draymond.
a Draymond. And I think there's only maybe two or three guys that you can say can actually switch 1 through 5.
Yeah.
At a level where you're comfortable doing it for an entire playoffs,
And
run.
that is why I hesitate saying that. And also, it's like you don't also just have to have that elite 1 through 5 guy. You have to have a 3 through 4 guy. You have
Yeah.
to have a 1 through 3 guy and a 4 through 5. Like you have to have all switchable players. And obviously, you don't have to have 5 good defenders. Like like Steph Curry was on that team. That was the best defensive team in the league, right? He's not a great or good switchable defender, but if you surround him with 3 to 4 switchable defenders, then that's okay. But that's
Yeah.
hard to produce.
And it's like,
In terms of just like reliability,
is it still base drop?
it's probably base drop. Depending on it really just depends on your roster as well. Like for
Yeah.
instance, the Nuggets, they should be running base drop.
Yeah.
But when Jokic is in pick and rolls, like that's just as simple. And you can like press the drop a little bit, but a lot of times, especially in the playoffs, like you want to live with someone taking a midi or a floater. So
Yeah.
drop coverage is probably the easiest way to force that. And then obviously, if you just want to keep them away from the rim, switch is the easiest. But then if you don't have the roster for that, it is terrible and you will get eaten alive. So it just matters.
Yeah, I agree. I think some version of a base drop. I don't think deep drop works as well because I think
Mhm.
offensive guards are so talented at understanding how to use a floater or a mid range at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're looking at it, I'm going to name teams that you need to worry about, but this is not a team that you need to be like. I'm gonna get rid of the obvious
Yeah.
like tier one contenders because we know they have good players,
Yeah.
but like
One thing
in
I
the
also
East,
do want to say about deep drop real quick before if we, I don't know if we're getting off topic of it. It also opens up a pick and pop
yeah,
for skilled big men. The big men are too skilled to just play deep drop anymore. You're just giving up open jumpers for guys that are gonna finish it.
yeah,
But go ahead.
yeah. So this is to do with the drop, but it's like if you're playing, so the let's say the top four teams in the East right now are Boston, Milwaukee, the Sixers, and the Heat. So those four teams all are very different stylistically, to be honest. But when you're playing them in their matchups, so example, the 5 through 8 seed, I'm not going to go through the play and stuff right now, but it's like the Magic, like that is a team who likes to get downhill. I'm not worried about them really creating mid-range opportunities. They really struggle to score. The Cavs, if you're playing drop on the deep drop on the Cavaliers, Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are going to eat you up.
Yeah.
The Knicks, Jalen Brunson is a known like mid-range pull-up assassin. That's his go-to thing. And the Pacers, you're playing Tyrese in a deep drop. You're getting eaten up as well with the floaters, and that level of passing as well. In the West, we have the Timberwolves, Thunder, Nuggets, Clippers, top four teams. Kings, Sabonis can really make you pay in that area, as well as De'Aaron. Luke is definitely going to make you pay in that area. Brandon Ingram's going to really kill you in that area as well. Then you get to the Rockets, where it's like Sengun might be able to attack you there. Fred VanVleet might be able to get you attack you there, but they're not a great offensive team. Very similar to the Magic, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's like the Lakers. It's like you don't want to give LeBron space to operate off of pick and
No.
rolls.
And it's a certain balance because like you don't want to give certain people a head of steam.
Yep.
But then
You don't want
also
to
it's
deep
like,
drop against Giannis.
no. Also, you can't give certain people any space at all. So it's like that's why one thing also, again, it's hard. I would say do ice coverage, which is force some baseline. Don't let them come middle on ball screens.
Yeah.
But
And then trap,
again,
quarter trap.
Yeah, but like if you try to force Luca to go baseline, he's just gonna get his way to the middle. So it's like you can try to go ice, but against at some point, like it's only gonna work against teams that don't have an elite ball handler in the pick and roll, or if you're on the bench unit with someone who can't dictate like that. Because then when you when you take it away, like when you're trying to ice and they get to the middle of the floor, the defensive possession is over. Like everyone's out of position and you're done.
Yeah.
And you try to force them baseline, they get middle, and like you're cooked. So it's like you don't really want to rely on that, especially in the playoffs. When things slow down and an offensive player is going to be like, oh, they're trying to force me baseline. Retreat, take my
Yeah.
time, make sure they're big, and I get on page and I get to the middle. Like that's not going to work when it slows down.
Yeah.
And it's weird because everyone talks about offense slowing down in the playoffs, but the key in the defensive end is to make sure that the offense speeds itself up somehow, some way.
Yeah.
And
create
again, Yeah.
erratic shot opportunities.
Yes, exactly. And honestly, through this whole conversation, I feel like it kind of shows, and even saying that, you have to have erratic defense. So switching up schemes is really valuable. That's again why you see Miami be so valuable in the playoffs defensively because they can run zone, they can run man, they can
Drop.
run they can run drop, they can run any type of zone, any type of man, whenever they want because they have both the IQ of the players, the coach, and the skill set of the players match up.
Yeah.
So it's really just a grab bag, but you got to be good at something. And then I think there's so much about about the defense, dude. But you have to be good at something, but you have to have stuff in your back pocket because you will get exposed.
Yeah, if you try
whether
to
that-
stay on one thing too long, you're gonna get work.
and whether that's personnel, and that could be bench personnel, like you keep your starters, but then for some reason when your bench guard comes in, like you can't run drop coverage. It's been a problem all season. You want to run drop coverage, but for some reason you just can't do it. You got to get a different guy in that can run drop coverage. But
Yeah.
you got to make sure you're at least, like you said, making the offense feel erratic. And however you can do that, honestly, just do it.
Yeah.
There's not an answer to these guys in the league. Like, it's hard.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what you have to say too. It's like, when you're looking at these, it's like, yeah, some teams definitely give up big games or big nights scoring games to more often than other teams, but it's like you can point to any team and show where they're giving up a ton of points. I mean, you can see games where the top defensive teams are just giving up absolutely ridiculously scoring nights to really bad teams. Some nights 3-pointers are just going to be keep falling, and you can't really keep up with it. If your shot's not falling that night and their shot is, it's just you're going to be in a dogfight for the whole game most likely.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you really come into that balance question of how do you balance that? And I think you had a good point where it's like 65-35 defense, where maybe even 60-40, honestly.
Yeah.
Where it's like you need to be as locked in as possible when you need to be. And I think the ability to control scoring runs, is really what leads to a successful NBA or playoff defense, being able to not allow them to go on those 8-0 runs, those 10-0 runs, those 12-2 runs. Those type of runs are what kills you in a game.
Yeah.
And being able to respond to that with either offense or defense is probably going to be the most valuable thing you can do. If a team can't make a run on you, then the game is going to be pushed down into a very close game the entire time. If you're creating at a similar opportunity, the offense is both, producing at the same rate, and neither team is going on long runs or either way, it gets down to that last 5 minutes. It's who can get stops for the last 5 minutes, who can create offense when the defense is the most locked in. And I think that's where those clutch time stats really are more reflective of how your team is going to do in a playoff series. Because how often are playoff games really blowouts, especially in the second round and conference finals?
Yeah. The only one I could think about was like last year was the Lakers game against the Grizzlies, right? Or wait, no, or was it
Lakers, Grizzlies, They did blow them out, I think, in the game 6. The Sixers and the Celtics blew out the Sixers in their game 7. And then the Heat blew out the Celtics, but also Tatum got hurt in the first quarter. So
Yeah, but like blowouts do happen.
but you're not going to see sustainable blowouts.
No, and I think like what you said, controlling runs is really important. And the way you do that, it sounds so stupid what I'm about to say. You diversify the one thing you're good at. So
Yeah.
if you're just playing plain drop coverage and they start cooking you on the back line, right? So say like you got to step up and they start cooking you on either in the pocket pass or throwing over, switching, whatever they're doing. Then you got to make sure to stop that run that you're changing what you're doing on the back line. You don't completely go away from drop coverage what you've done all season. That's stupid. That's not what I mean when diversify what you're good at. The X cut or whatever you're doing on the back line or whatever personnel you're on the back line, you have to change. And when you're able to do that, you're able to stop the run, but then also not completely flip what you're trying to do in the most important part of your season, right? Like that's not what you want to do. You just want to be able to just tweak what you're good at a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Being able to, I think a great term for it is flex. Being able to flex your offensive and defensive schemes in the playoffs is what's going to really lead you to a successful and sustainable level of play. Because you see it, I mean, a team that has and I hate to bring it up because they're my team, but like the Bucks are a great example of this year. I think it's just like you might be an average to slightly below average defense right now, but you're the best offense in the league. You're one of the best offenses statistically of all time. If you could keep like an off night for the offense, like I said earlier, a team that's scoring 122 points per 100 possessions this year, they're 122 offensive rating. If that goes down, if you're scoring 8 points under your average, that's still you're still going to be you're going to be like a middle of the pack offense.
Yeah.
Where it's like if you are a team that's only scoring 115, you're going to be a bottom tier offense on an off night. That's not good. That's just not going to work.
And the thing about offense is that it's still so variant.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's where that balance thing comes up. And you have to be able to create rim shot opportunities along with side efficient jump shoot.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a good example of like similar to where the Bucks are now in the beginning of the season. I know I've brought the Nuggets up, but the Nuggets last year, they were in a similar position where defensively halfway first quarter of the year, like they were solid middle of the pack, but like I think they were below 15 at some point, and because
they were pretty rough.
Months, they were like up really high on the uptick. So again, they had an elite offense, one of the better offenses. They knew what they were good at defensively, and they continued to improve. They were on the uptick come playoff time, and they were probably one of the top 5 most functional defenses at the time going into the playoffs.
And an understanding of scheme is very helpful. Being just knowing what you have to do. Because if you look at a lot of shot charts for teams that are bad defensively usually give up easy shot opportunities. I think if you understand where those opportunities where your weak points are and you can mitigate them to some extent, I think that helps a lot. Honestly.
And honestly, like maybe being a good defense halfway through the year is a little overrated. When the Celtics went on their crazy run, like I know they had a depoy that year, but like
they were a bad.
They weren't consistent.
They were like a 7th seed.
You kind of have to get like beat up. You got to see your weaknesses on defense to know what you're weak at. A good example, Cleveland last year. They were good all year. Were they really challenged? No. Knicks came in, bullied them. Then they're like, oh crap, we can get bullied. We didn't know that. They weren't prepared to make any changes because they didn't know they needed to. So I don't think regular season holds this huge hierarchy on everything, but it's definitely important to see trends, to see numbers in the half court, and to see what the identity of a team is. because that's what's important when come playoff time.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a good place. I think we've really found our answer here, honestly, to
Yeah.
this question. It's the ability to, at the end of the day, in the modern NBA, it's the ability to control the pace and the setting of a game, and the ability to control the runs of those games, and having different ways to achieve that. And I think more and more teams are understanding that at the end of the day, the statistics and numbers that we so do crave over for the entire regular season, um, eventually, when you get to May, um, those numbers they're completely thrown out the window because it's a whole different ballgame. You saw it last year with the Heat. Bad offense last year, like bad offense. Got to the playoffs and immediately started shooting 45-50% from three every game, and they went on to the finals. And then when they cooled off, they lost. so I think it's really just, I think it's like we said, it's the control and balance between the two. It's the yin and yang of offense and defense, understanding what you're good at and not good at, and being able to counteract those sort of issues, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about wraps up what we were talking about today. Throughout this video, we're recording on the 29th here. Probably won't hear back from us until after New Year's. So anyone who is watching this, hope you guys have a great New Year's. If you're celebrating, stay safe out there. But anyways, I appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and peace out.
Peace.